You know, the Giants on every level have had a disastrous season. They've had a disastrous season in terms of losing games. They've had a disastrous season in terms of key injuries. They've had a disastrous season in terms of questioning this head coach. They even had a disastrous season yesterday when Evan Neal made those unfortunate comments and did eventually apologize on social media. If this season is as bad as it feels, and Sean Morash, who was on this show as a Giant fan, even said, going into that Seattle game, if we don't win, we're just better off losing and tanking. If you believe that, and you believe this season is going to hell in a handbasket, don't you have to strongly consider right now selling off valuable pieces before the trade deadline on October 31st?
You know what your problem is, Ev?
My problem? I've got many problems, Tiki.
Your problem is you are baseball on the brain all the time.
What does that mean?
All the time you are baseball on the brain. Even, in the next month, where your baseball season is dead because the Mets crapped it 3 months ago.
Thanks for reminding me.
Just finished it out, I guess, somewhat interestingly, because you got some of these young kids up and they saw some playing time. But you still did the Rico. You did it enthusiastically. You'll do the Rico next week. You'll do it next month. Hell, you might do it in January.
I will.
The Rico.
I will.
Talking about nothing, nonsense. And right now, because you have so much baseball on the brain, Pete Alonso and whatnot, you want to think about football and baseball terms. It's 4 games in. Yes, I know it's a quarter of the season, not quite the quarter point, because I think you got to get 17 minutes into week 5.
Yeah, that 17th game really effed things up, by the way.
It did. It's like you got to get 17 minutes into week 5 before you hit the actual quarter mark of the season. But in the quarter mark in baseball, if things start crappily, you know what you do? You start thinking about selling.
Yeah.
You start thinking about moving pieces so that you can reset for next year.
Yeah.
But this is football, man. This is 17 games of every single day means something different. Where the Giants are 1-3. They're not 1-8, which is the close to the actual trade deadline day in the NFL. They are 1-3, and anything can happen. But the last thing that they're thinking about right now, or any fan should be thinking about, is who can we trade away and get some pieces?
First of all,
kidding? What's wrong with you, Evan?
Here's why you have to think that way. The trade deadline in the NFL is October 31st. We don't have until week 10 to make that decision. We don't. That's just the way the NFL is structured. So the trade deadline is in 26 days, which means you will play, if my math is correct, 3 more games before the trade deadline? 3 more games?
No, 4.
4 more games. Okay. Fair enough.
Yes.
You've got 2 games that are upcoming against Miami and Buffalo. The Giants are the biggest underdog on the board this weekend. They'll be a huge underdog next weekend. It is very likely they're staring at 1-5. Very likely. While you may try to talk yourself into beating Washington and beating the Jets and somehow getting to 3-5, this season is spiraling. So I bring this up not because it's baseball. I bring it up because it's real. I bring it up because in the NFL over the last few years, football's trade deadline, in a weird way, has sort of turned into baseball. We've seen guys sold at the deadline. We've seen it. We saw Christian McCaffrey moved for a lot. We've seen it happen. The NFL,
which was a similar situation. The Carolina Panthers were going nowhere.
And they traded a star running back. I wonder if you had a running back that you have no plans on keeping long term that maybe you could sell.
And by the way, he had been battling injury for the last couple of years.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
McCaffrey, and they'd paid him money, and they didn't want to fulfill his contract, so they traded him to the San Francisco 49ers. By the way, that worked out for everybody.
Yeah.
Worked out for everybody.
You don't see scenarios where if this season, and look, it's not happening today. I'm not suggesting it would happen today. I'm suggesting you got to start thinking about it. This team's 1-3. This team stinks. Outside of 2 good quarters against the Arizona Cardinals, have been the worst team in the NFL, and it seems now like they're starting to get the stories that bad teams usually get. Like Evan Neal calling out the fans doesn't mean, hey, they're going to suck.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake.
It is, but it's one of those stories that seem to follow bad teams in bad seasons. And so you have guys on this roster, I'll name them, who are free agents at the end of the year who would garner back value, draft pick value that maybe Joe Shane could actually turn into a valuable draft pick considering his drafts have struggled a little bit. Saquon Barkley is obviously the headline name. And if he could ever get his ass back on the field, and even if he doesn't, I think there are plenty of teams that would take a gamble on bringing in a star player like Saquon Barkley. Look, you've got a guy like Adoree Jackson who's a free agent at the end of the year. You don't think there's a team in the NFL that would say, hey, we trade for a veteran corner like Adoree Jackson? You don't think so?
Here's the thing, and here's the problem. So as much as we'll have a different conversation about Saquon tomorrow if it looks like, as it does right now, that he's not going to play again. But from an outside team perspective, would you really want Saquon Barkley right now?
I would,
Saquon Barkley, who is the poster child of what's wrong with the running back position. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm saying this because nobody wants top-end running backs. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to pay top-end running backs. Dalvin Cook, who was 4 times in a row a Pro Bowler in Minnesota, gets cut because they think they can go forward with Alexander Madison. And they don't want to continue to pay Dalvin Cook, even though he's still a good player, even though what he's doing with the Jets is kind of showing that he's not a good pay. Maybe Minnesota was on to something. But the running back has gotten so disrespected, and they believe, or teams believe, they can find a guy anywhere. So why would you want Saquon Barkley? Hell, most teams didn't even want Jonathan Taylor, who's 2-3 years younger than Saquon and was clearly available from the Indianapolis Colts.
Why? I'll tell you the answer to that, because you're right. Teams don't want Saquon Barkley or Jonathan Taylor if it means A, giving them a long-term contract, or B, giving up premium draft picks. You're not getting a first-round pick for Saquon Barkley. I'm not suggesting that. Could a team, specifically the Cleveland Browns, and don't give me Jerome Ford. The guy had one good game. While ideally, we found a running back in the 5th round to replace our injured Nick Chubb. This is amazing. The guy had one good game. Mm-hmm. You're telling me the Cleveland Browns at 2-2 wouldn't be interested in acquiring a talent like Saquon Barkley? The Baltimore Ravens, after the J.K. Dobbins injury, wouldn't have an interest in acquiring Saquon Barkley? You're not getting a first-round pick. You're also not giving him a contract extension.
Yeah.
But you're adding him to try to win this season. I think there would be a market for him, and if this season is going to spiral, and I think most Giant fans think it has and it will, wouldn't it be a disservice to not explore that market?
I think the problem for me is that it still feels so alien to give up on a season this quickly. 1-3 stinks. It does. It's terrible. It feels terrible. But 1-3 is not terminal. 1-3. If you upset one of the next 2 teams, at Miami, at Buffalo, there's a good chance that the Giants find themselves, they start to get healthy again. Because I look at their injury list right now, and it's all starters. Right, you got 3 of your offensive linemen. Even Shane Lemieux, who wasn't even good at guard, he's hurt right now. You got 3 of your interior offensive linemen banged up. Andrew Thomas is likely not to play again. Daniel Bellinger's banged up. Saquon Barkley. 4 of your 11 starters are hurt. And so if they start to get healthy, which it feels like they're going to, who knows what happens? And so to start thinking about quitting it's
not quitting. You're phrasing it wrong.
It is.
I get it for you feeling that way.
It's quitting on the season, and it's starting to think forward to next year. Well, how can we get this thing back next year? Let's kick this thing down kick the can down the road for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane another year. Yeah, we'll toll this season, right? They got equity from last year because they exceeded expectations so far. This season, it doesn't matter. Like I can't wrap my head around.
I don't blame you for feeling that way because you're a player. And if I was in that locker room, I would think the exact same way. I would phrase it the same way, and I would think the same way. But here's how I view this as a fan. If this team and this season is going nowhere, and I've got guys like Saquon Barkley, who's a free agent, who my organization has made crystal clear, we have no interest in him being here long term. We will play it year to year with him. And by the way, we can't trust him to stay healthy. Mm-hmm. Xavier McKinney, I don't know if they have any interest in him being here long term, but he's a free agent at the end of the year. And I've got a chance to turn guys who may be gone at the end of the year anyway into draft capital because I'm trying to win next year and the year after and the year after that. When a lot of the guys on this roster right now won't even be around, that's called smart business.
Well, it is.
It's a tough sell to your fans. It's a very tough sell to the locker room. I acknowledge that, but it's smart business.
But I think that's the biggest thing. So once that happens, and once a guy like Saquon or Adoree Jackson, even though Adoree is not organic to the Giants, like he's a free agent, or actually he was traded. However he got here, right? He's not, or he wasn't
drafted by
the Giants. He's not ours, but it just feels like Xavier McKinney is, Adoree Jackson was not, but it still feels like if that starts to happen, that this team, player-wise, locker room-wise, starts looking around going, all right, who's next? Right? What's next?
Yeah, I get that.
And then it gets ugly, and then nobody goes to the games, and people start losing faith in the Brian Dabolls and in the Joe Shanes. Now, maybe that's happening a little bit now, but if they moved everybody, it would be like you're just quitting. Nobody wants to see a quitter.
Tiki, we've seen organizations in this town be honest with their fans. The Mets just did it. The Rangers did it a few years ago where, hey, this is not going the way we want it. So we're going to do things to help us for the future.
Yeah, but that's baseball.
No, that's hockey too, and it can happen in football. You admitted Carolina was smart for doing it last year.
Of course they were, because they were going nowhere, and you just knew they were going nowhere.
And where the hell is this team going?
I know that they made the playoffs last year.
That's last year.
I know that Daniel Jones, as bad as he is against NFC teams and on prime time, he has not lost a game under Brian Daboll to an AFC squad. And so you got two of them coming up. And I don't know if that's familiarity. I don't know if that's lack of I don't know what it is. But he's 5-0 against AFC teams in the last 2 years. Even though that's mostly all of last year. So he can, I know Daniel Jones has positive things in his game. You see it in bits here. I think he's pressing. I think this offensive line is a disaster. And if they start to get healthy, I don't know what's going to happen. But the last thing I'm thinking about right now is tearing it down and getting rid of some assets that are going to help us win right now.
Would you think about it at 1-4?
I don't think I would think about it until they're 1-6 or 1-7.
Well, they can't be, though. I guess they could be 1-7 because there are 4 games before the deadline. But there's a cutoff on this, which is October 31st. And you've got 4 games coming up. And if things don't turn, look, obviously, Tiki, if it turns.
Last year, the Detroit Lions were 2-6, correct? Or what were they?
Well,
last
they
year?
were 3-6.
3-6, and then they went on a run and almost made the postseason. And by the way, look at them right now; they're 3-1. And if it wasn't for a bad overtime loss earlier in the season, they could be 4-0. They're against
By the way,
Seattle.
Tiki, if they made the playoffs, they would have been the 6th straight year in the NFL a team at 3-6 made the playoffs.
Yes,
it's not about the record; it's about how they're playing.
But it is. But because Detroit was terrible at the beginning of last year, it was almost like, okay, that's Jared Goff we know. And then all of a sudden, he goes 8 weeks without throwing an interception. It was unbelievable.
No, I get it. They had a great turnaround, and turnarounds can happen.
Yes.
But when you look at this roster and you look at this team, if things get worse and they're on their way to that, they have all the makings of a bad team. Early signs are there. Even little things like the Evan Neal thing from yesterday. If this continues to get ugly, you have to be smart long term. And I would fully expect that Sean is going to completely agree with me, considering he went into Monday night's game and said, hey, if we don't win this game, we're better off tanking.
So, yes and no.
What do you mean yes and no?
If you're telling me this team has no plans on bringing Saquon Barkley back and it's going to net us one wild card round, we're not going to compete with Philly or San Fran, I'm okay with hearing that. Where Tiki is right, where you're kind of crazy with the baseball and hockey thing is this. You have minor leagues. You have time to groom those people. All right? The Giants have, 6 picks coming up. You're not going to use, and you saw it last year, 11 or 12 picks. You just don't have room for all those guys to make a team next year.
Yeah,
So
they're wasted. You draft them and it's a waste of a pick.
So if you want a smart sell-off, like a team offers you a 2nd and a 6th for Saquon, I'm for that. But just to go, have Saquon, have Adoree, and then stockpile
everything
like 6,
is a smart. No, hold on. Every sell has to be smart.
But
there needs to be a value attached to it.
But I think it's harder. I think it's so hard to do that in the NFL.
Right.
Who was it? Simmons. Justin Simmons. No, it was Isaiah.
Isaiah Simmons.
Justin Simmons this weekend. I have Denver. Isaiah Simmons, that trade made sense for everybody because Wink might use him. The Giants gave up a 6th-round pick that didn't matter. And the Arizona Cardinals got rid of a problem. When I look at Saquon, I don't look at him as a problem, right? I don't look at Adoree Jackson as a problem. I look at them as part of this solution when things start to go right again. And I think I'm just choosing to believe that things will go right before they get worse. I know what you're saying, because you're right. All the things that are going wrong, from the bad special teams we saw a week ago, from the horrendous tackling we saw in San Francisco to the lack of luck against Dallas. This team seems like it can't win no matter what. But at the same time, if things can flip in the NFL so quickly, there's no way I'm giving up on it or even thinking about it 4 weeks into this season.
I think you've got to consider it the closer we get to October 31st because you've got pieces on this roster that can net you value back. And every draft pick isn't about just using the pick. Some of it is to have extra picks to then move up in the draft for somebody that you're targeting. And we don't know what kind of situation the Giants are going to be in next year. If this season spirals, and I think most of us think that it probably will.
Well, but
they're 1-3 staring down the Dolphins and the Bills over the next 2 weeks.
That's where you almost have to eliminate these two games. I know that sounds crazy.
Eliminate them?
In this mindset.
You mean as far as evaluating?
Evaluating. The Giants are so beyond banged up, and a quarterback has no confidence at all, and they're walking in to play two of the best teams in football. I think we all have accepted that we want to be surprised and want to be shocked. It's probably going to look ugly. However, ironically, that timeline probably, hopefully aligns with Saquon being healthy, Andrew Thomas being healthy, and the trade deadline, a perfect example. It's going to come down to Washington and the Jets, those two games. If it's ugly and they don't win both, forget just one, they need to win both of those games.
Then you sell.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But if they win both of those games and they're 3-5, it will be a pit of our stomach. We won't like the fact that they're 3-5, but they'll be 3-5 going, well, I get the Raiders next week.
Yes,
We're
exactly.
feeling a little confident.
I'm starting to see winnable games.
Thank you.
And who is getting that last wild card in the NFC?
And here's the thing: it doesn't matter how you have success. You just have to have success, especially when your team's not ready. Like if you are this, I'm trying to think of a team that's Cincinnati is the perfect example. If you're Cincinnati and you think your team is right there, and you're getting your doors blown off, and your quarterback's hurt, and you're starting to feel some grumblings in the wide receiver room because Jamar Chase is not getting enough touches, and neither is Tyler Boyd, et cetera, et cetera. Like winning games isn't good enough because you almost need to be on par with the Kansas City Chiefs of the world and the Buffalo Bills of the world. That's not the Giants. The Giants just need to win. Right? They need to, because I knew this going into the season. They weren't tier 1. I mean, hell, they were barely tier 2 as we've seen the beginning of the season. But winning builds confidence, and it builds something to grow upon in the subsequent years when this roster really gets put the way that I think Dable and Joe Shane want it to be. But to just strip it down now, that doesn't make sense because it undercuts the plan. I think it creates a situation where you're just saying, I don't know what our plan is. We're going to fly by the seat of our pants, and that just doesn't work in the NFL.
Well, what's the long-term plan for Saquon Barkley? And we talked about this during the offseason. Do they expect him to be here next year and the year after that, or is this going to be a year-by-year flyer with
honestly,
him?
I talked about this last year when it was kind of coming up, when it was happening. Yes.
So
franchise him next year as well.
So based on that, if you have a desperate team in the AFC, like the Cleveland Browns or the Baltimore Ravens or any other team you want to come up with, who act a little bit different in October than maybe they will in April, when they're trying to win football games, and they got hit by a couple of surprisingly devastating injuries like Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins, if all of a sudden a team makes you a pretty damn good offer for Saquon Barkley, don't you have to think about it, considering you're even admitting he's a year-to-year proposition here? He's a running back. The league thinks they're easily replaceable. And what's the max reward on this Giant season? Sneaking into the playoffs? Like, what's the ultimate? The ultimate is to win a championship. That's why Joe Shane is here. That's why Brian Daboll's here. And that valuable asset, that draft pick you get back, will probably help you more long-term than this game we're going to play every year of tagging Barkley and then him missing a bunch of games and then tagging him again.
Yeah, here's the issue with the running back is that anybody can pop up and be the next great player next year, or the year after, or the year after that. Christian McCaffrey is always going to be one of he's always going to be at the top, right? But then you look at a guy like James Conner. I forgot James Conner was still in the league. He's actually a pretty good running back. You look at, these rookies that get drafted. Who was the kid from Texas?
Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson, right? He's having a good start to his season. I did the Denver game, and I know that Javonte Williams, the starting running back, got hurt, but the kid that filled in for him, Jaleel McLaughlin, who nobody's heard of from Youngstown State, he was awesome. He's got 2 touchdowns.
Breece Hall was a second-round pick.
What's that?
Breece Hall was
Breece
a second-round pick.
Exactly right. Devon A-Chain, who's 5'8", 180 pounds down in Miami, he's averaging 11 yards a carry.
So doesn't that just prove that you should cash out on him if you can?
Well, I just don't think you can.
Well, that's different. And I think that you can find teams right now. We saw it last year with the Niners. As great as McCaffrey is, because Christian McCaffrey's number 1, but ask yourself, who's number 2? as an all-around back in this league. He's not that far off.
No.
So if your point is you can find running backs anywhere, yeah, I agree. And if you're the Giants and you can get a valuable pick for him now, maybe multiple picks for him now, I would absolutely do it.
I just think it's easier said than done, and it destroys your locker room because he's your captain. He is the.
You are right about that.
When he's healthy, he's the example.
You are 100% right about that. But my counter to that is, should it matter if in the long-term interest of the team it's better? Should that matter? Like, I get it. Everybody in that room would be distraught if they started taking pieces off this team like Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley. I could never argue that with you because you're obviously right. I know that's how you would have felt if it happened.
Of course.
But now take a step back. You're the New York Giants, and this is a long-term build, right? This isn't just this year. Is it not smart?
I just don't see it being worth it now. Maybe in 4 weeks. But right now, to me, it's just not worth it.
So at 1-6, you will agree with me.
1-6, I might agree.
Okay.
Might agree.
Because you're on your way to 1-5. So we're almost there.
Team stinks. Everything stinks.
And you over there.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Pleasantly plum, Sean.
Plum.
You said plump. You said to us, all of us, me, as a football fan, everybody listening.
But you know why, though?
Why? I didn't even finish. What did I say?
I know what
did
you're
he say?
What after if they lose against Seattle,
yes,
then you might as well start taking.
Yes, that's you.
But you know why he can't do it?
Why?
Because he's a fan.
No.
And he doesn't want his
But he
team
lectured
to lose.
all of us as Jet fans too, right?
No.
Go
There's
ahead.
a difference, and I'm going to defend myself
Go
here.
ahead.
Realistically, is this Giant team better off losing every single game the rest of the year and drafting Caleb Williams to play quarterback for this team? Yes, they are. However, realistically, I still don't think, based on head coach and the talent here, that they are capable of tanking that badly, and they're going to end up with 6-7 wins if they do so.
Same thing I said about the Jets. Okay, now let's move to this. Are they better off if this deal is out there? And I understand, I'm hypotheticalizing, I think that's a word, the teams that could use him. And I specifically said Baltimore or Cleveland. If you could get back a second-round pick or a third-round pick for Saquon Barkley, a second or third-round pick for Xavier McKinney, and the team sucks. I'm not saying you're getting Caleb Williams and you're finishing with the worst record in the league, but you got back two pretty valuable picks, maybe three, for those two guys. Are you better off long-term?
With Saquon, you are. I think Xavier's a different story, but Saquon, you are for sure.
Okay.
Because Xavier McKinney, by the way, I think we could all agree, could be very much a part of the solution.
Are they going to re-sign him?
Yeah, he could be one of the bricks that builds the foundation.
If you trade Saquon Barkley, you could easily franchise tag Xavier McKinney as well.
That's true. That is true.
So
those are a few of the options. I was looking, when I think about this, like, okay, who has value? And I'm not even entertaining the Daniel Jones thing. That's ridiculous. Daniel Jones to the Jets or something crazy like that.
That's part of the problem. There's not a ton of guys that have, I really want that player.
I think it's Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney, Saquon Barkley, Darren Waller if he was healthy.
No, you're not going to get anything for Darren Waller.
Paris Campbell.
No, you're not getting any. There's nobody. That's it.
Leonard Williams is kind. Oh, you know who? Dexter Lawrence. You want to trade him?
No, he just signed him. He's
Sexy
part of
Dexy.
He's part of the future. You can't get rid of guys who are part of the future. That's the problem. And I think if anybody that has the real value on the Giants, they're part of the future.
Well, there are two guys who probably are not a part of their future: Adoree Jackson and Saquon Barkley. If we're being honest.
Evan Neal.
And speaking of Evan Neal, we'll get into his apology coming up, plus your calls 877-337-6666. A little bit later on in the show, the return of the ever-controversial and the ever-beloved Bad Tiki, the AI-generated evil version of Tiki Barber.